Hey y'all, Game Methuselah. I want to show you a little thing as we're working on our Enlightened videos. And one of it has to do with a lot of things that people have been asking me about for years, is how I create like legendary magical items and everything else. And you know, instead of just using sort of generic stuff that's in the rule books, whatever system I'm playing, I always love to make my own because it really adds to the game. And you know, it's interesting, playing in Mark's D&D game now, we were talking about Mark wanted a very low magical item type thing game, you know, where it was just not a lot of that stuff out there, which I really disagree with. My attitude more than anything else is I like really high-level magic items. I like people to get them early, but they don't have to be full power. And that's, I think, kind of what I wanted to show you here, how I do stuff. Now, I just did two things really quick here. One is, this is one of the Tooth of the Dragon. This is Gorgon. It's one of the singing swords, which means it has little vents in it, so when you swing it around, it makes this sort of moaning, whining sound, and you put them together and the tones are different in each one. So the more of the singing swords you have of the great Teeth of the Dragon, the more additional powers that magic gives you in the sounds they make. But basically, when somebody finds Gorgon for the first time, normally what you're going to have is on any kind of a relic type thing or a magic item, there's usually something where the players get the feeling this is something special they found. In this case, you'd have Gorgon, the name of the, usually imprinted on the sword. Somehow it's been marked into the sword, either really flashy, or maybe it's in some ancient language, or just a symbol on it that indicates what it is. Normally on these Teeth of the Dragon, their hilts were all unique to them, and they sort of represented what the item was. So the hilt of this sort of had a Gorgon motif, and that made it really interesting. Now, people have asked about the singing swords, but this is how I would start them out. Basically, somebody finds it. They go, oh, the sword's named Gorgon, or they think it's Gorgon, this legendary sword, one of the 6 Teeth of the Dragon. So they look at it and they go, well, maybe it is. It's a broadsword. That sounds consistent. It sings. That definitely sounds like something they've heard about because it makes that wailing noise. But most importantly for them, what they see is the sword has been thrice forged, which means the blade has been broken 2 times, and they've literally 3 times, and they've reforged it 3 times. And that was sort of always the thing, that a thrice forged sword was this magical thing. So it was forged once, it breaks, they forge it again, it breaks, now it's been reforged 3 times, or it's been forged 3 times, and now it's destined for some sort of greatness. And that's what I did with the singing sword. So it was another thing to do about it. The other thing is they swing it around, or if the mages sort of study for a period of time, the mages can sense the magic. It's very powerful, and it's super potent. And they know that, but they don't know anything else. But when it gets swung around and played with by whoever's carrying it, he realizes he has an additional D9 of ease on his attacks. Now that's all he knows, but somehow he senses that there's more to this sword, as if it has a very much an intelligence of its own. And maybe it's not willing to give out all its secrets until it realizes that the wielder is worth the trouble. And that's how I ran these. And the interesting thing about it is, of course, is in our game, because we have enlightenments, the easiest thing I found that, yes, you could study it, yes, you could try to figure it out, but in a shorter way is if you use the sword and something happens and you get an enlightenment, you could use the enlightenment for a new skill or a new ability, like we always have said in the rules, or you could say, you know what, I want to unlock one of the achievements. So then as the GM, you would unlock the next achievement in the sword that they would acquire. Now, that could be based upon what they did. Now, Gorgon has lots and lots of different achievements, but what you might find is it might have a group achievement. Maybe it was one of these things that you saved a friend, and you pulled somebody, you know, something that you did using the sword that might enhance one of the unique situations. If not, it could just be the next thing in the line. If you have the list of my singing swords that you'll acquire and you want to use them, then I'll just have them all listed. You can determine how you want to do it. But I think the reason to give out magic, and especially in my feeling, the reason to give out magic as soon as you can, is everybody feels more attached to both their character and the game once they have some kind of unique magical item. You know, yeah, the old D&D thing, you know, you get a +1 sword. Oh, gee, I'll add that to my golf bag full of +1 swords. But in the situation when you find something that's really magical, like a +3 returning Dwarven Warhammer, or a sword that had that flame, that had an intelligent and ego and would argue with you. Those things made the character really attached to their game. And I think that's something that's really good to do, is you give them these items that as they grow, the magic items will grow. And it's something you guys might consider. Now, we'll talk more about this. We're going to start putting lists together, different types of magical items. So I threw another one in that I immediately did early on in my campaign. The humans rescued some gnomes early on in the campaign. Now, the gnomes were really allies with the Fae, so the humans were not really necessarily friendly with the Fae, nor the gnomes, but the gnomes were appreciated in not getting killed, and that the humans rescued them. And in doing so, they gave them a set of gnome armor. Now, the great thing about armor in the game, obviously it stops hits, but usually an armor that stops 3 gives you a 3 encumbrance. Well, this gnomish armor was so magically created that it had a defense value of 4, but only encumbered you for 2 points. So you didn't get a 3-point encumbrance, you got a 2-point encumbrance, and it stopped 4 hits. And the sense was this was a suit of armor that could be easily enchanted by somebody who could do such a thing. Thusly, it could be something that you could have people later on add different and more powerful enchantments onto this gnomish armor. Could be the same type of thing. You're on an adventure, you're on a campaign, you're doing things to rescue things for some race, and a wizard or powerful entity might go, hey, you know, how can I repay you? Why don't I embellish that armor you have? Because it's a magical set of armor. I can add an additional embellishment on there, and whatever that wizard might be able to do, that could be done as a reward. You could have a pop cost, or maybe you would even have an enlightenment cost, depending on if it was something dramatic. But the idea with magic, as you're designing things, and I do this with all kinds of things, you want there to be some feeling that this is something so unique and so magical. It just isn't some generic thing. I never like magic to feel like, oh, I got a magical item, oh boy. You know, oh, it's a plus, because, you know, playing D&D right now, my rogue has a +2 short bow. I mean, it's the best weapon he has, and it's one of the best weapons in the game. But it feels so generic, because it just, you know, it's a +2 bow. But if it had been a +2 bow that had a purpose to slay, you know, dark elves or something, it would just feel so much more magical. And though you may not run into dark elves very often in the game, you know, maybe it wasn't going to be a big deal, but maybe somewhere in the future that's what it is. And it's also a little spur on for the DM as they're designing adventures. They're going to say, you know, maybe I want to throw some dark elves in here so that maybe that sword glows or something, or might there even be some additional magical abilities. These are things that you can do as a DM to keep adding to your game as it evolves and making it more interesting for the players, and more so that both are they attached to the character, but the items the character has acquired. Because a lot of times, sometimes, well, you know, the characters die, and then they have this epic weapon, but now you've found that it's been, you know, attuned to its dead owner. So the only person now who can carry this weapon is someone who's a relative of them. So you have to go on missions to find a brother or a son or something out there where you can give them this magic sword so the legacy can continue. Now, none of this is required, but the thing is, it always adds to that element of interest with the players and makes your game seem so much more unique, because they are. And that's what I always love, is when my games are so specialized that the players feel like that something was made or designed just for them. Something to think about in it. We'll be doing lots more magical items and things to show you in the future, so keep an eye out. And of course, I'll eventually start leaking out all the 6 teeth of the dragon, because everyone wants to see it, and the curses and what they were for. But until then, have a good night, and fight me devils fight, for I hate peace. Game on, and keep being enlightened with our game. We're putting out more content all the time, and it's on itch.io if you want to go buy the basic rules. We're going to keep adding to that, so if you buy the set of rules, you'll be getting more updates constantly. If you don't have any and you don't want to buy it, you know, go on there and pick up the playtest version. You can sort of see what we were doing and what we were thinking, and you might have some great ideas that you're going to like that you can stick in your own game even if you're not playing ours.